So we're all familiar with the PlayStation. Probably dominates video games, like just video game culture, like the games, all the different things.
Okay.
Did you guys know about the origins of the PlayStation? How it came to be? Pretty interesting. I learned about this. Okay, so the PlayStation.
Steve Jobs.
Sony.
No.
Steve Jobs. No, Sony originally was developing what was called the Nintendo PlayStation. And basically, they were developing, like, because Nintendo was trying to mess with, like, CD-ROM technology. And they were, like, announcing this and had prototypes, and they were working closely. But Nintendo publicly humiliated and kind of, like, backed out of a major deal that had been announced with Sony and ended up doing a partnership with Philips instead. The CEO at the time of Sony was so furious. Here, hold on. I do have actual notes for this. Okay. So in 1991, Nintendo decided to abandon its partnership that it forged a deal with Sony, and then it forged a deal with Philips, the competitor in the CD-ROM technology at the time, right? So it was like the late 1980s when they originally kind of got into bed together, and they were trying to develop the Nintendo PlayStation. So they backed out of that deal, and at the time, the Sony's president, Ty, can you? Oh, you can't see that. Norio Oja. He was so upset by Nintendo's decision.
He said Ty.
Well, he was
Why
so.
not TJ?
Well, you know,
Just kidding.
come on, man. Come on. Come on, buddy. He was so angered by Nintendo's decision, the PlayStation guy, that he basically authorized the continuing development of the console, eventually leading to the creation of now what we knew to be the PlayStation. However, everybody kind of doubted Sony's approach into the video game world, and they were like, this isn't going to take off, the CD-ROMs. But they gave it to a gentleman by the name of Ken Kutaragi, who's an engineer and basically worked with with consoles independently, and he was given free reign to develop the PlayStation. And then the PlayStation launched in 1994 and went on to become the most successful video game console of all time, and basically even bigger than at the time Nintendo's kind of sales.
Yeah, the original PlayStation sold 102 million
Yeah,
units,
it's
which is
insane.
insane. From 1994 when it released in Japan in December, I think, of 94. Until the end of sale in 2006.
Yeah, which it's also crazy to like think that they also opened up a whole new avenue, because at the time Nintendo was so restrictive with what they would allow basically within their video game systems.
Yeah.
And like, remember, like if you played Mortal Kombat for Nintendo, it had no blood, whereas if you played it for Sega, it then had blood. And the thing, I think the Sega Saturn had failed like miserably, so they're like, no home consumer wants CD-ROM technology for video games. You fucking morons. Why would you do something so silly? And then sure enough, yeah, they freaking went gangbusters as soon as, and it opened up a whole new freaking, at the time too, it was cutting edge graphics, right?
Yeah.
We can see the kind of to be blocky and all that sort of stuff now, but at the time it was considered cutting edge graphics. You could fit more memory into a smaller space. I remember like all the PlayStation games were awesome because they also even had like movie cutscenes and things of that nature. You're able to put like actual physical cutscenes. Tomb Raider was in the zeitgeist. It was super successful. They opened up the ability for like video game creators to be more creative and not as constricted with what Nintendo was trying to kind of just do within video games and dominating the market at the time. And now PlayStation obviously is the biggest game consoling system probably in the world. But it was just a really interesting story for me in general, because it's like you don't understand maybe the power of pivoting. I like one of my favorite wrestlers, and it's funny, like Brandy even called me. Cody Rhodes has this like quote basically, because he was like basically this just like low level mid card, awfully gimmicked character in WWE, and he left and he took a chance on himself. He bet on himself, and then he kind of developed his own character that then was so in demand that the company couldn't deny anymore. It was like, we'll take whatever package you put together. He created his own entrance theme and everything for himself. And there's a quote that describes him. It's like from undesirable to undeniable, right? And it's pretty inspirational if you think about it. I'll tell you guys, I feel like there's been, and I'm sure it's not exclusive to me. There's been many points where you've probably felt like overlooked or whatever it may be, or hey, I haven't. I mean, it's happened to me within like music videos and stuff. I got overlooked like for editing gigs, for a bunch of opportunities at many points in my life. And then shortly after, if the opportunity presented itself for me to kind of step into that role, have always taken a chance to try to blow people away the best I can. And obviously, I think everybody has the ability to do that. And I love this story because it's the same sort of thing, right? From
Yeah.
undesirable to undeniable. And
Hell yeah.
I don't know. It was a really cool thing that I learned. It was very inspirational, and I just challenge everybody watching. Go do something with that you're fucking undeniable at.
You know what's
Wreck
you know
the
what's
shit.
crazy about that? It took until the Nintendo.
You didn't mess it up though. You
No,
said it.
in my head I messed it up.
No,
and I
you
was
like- you
what
said
the
it
hell
right.
just
Yeah.
happened?
Yeah.
Because in my head it was
glitched.
and I was
Yeah.
like, what?
No, you said Nintendo.
It took until the Nintendo Switch for a home console to outperform the original PlayStation, and it still doesn't come close to the PlayStation 2. Sony knocked it out of the park with
Yeah,
those two
absolutely.
systems, and it's absolutely insane. Because even if you include like Nintendo's handheld systems, the 3DS and the Game Boy Color and the Game Boy, those both outperform the PlayStation, but don't come close to touching the PlayStation 2. Because the PlayStation 2 sold 160 million units.
Dude, the
and that
PlayStation
was
2.
6 years after the PlayStation.
The PlayStation 2 with Grand Theft Auto 3 was a moment in time, folks. Like it was such a
Yes.
moment that like it like was a defining era within pop culture. Like everything was.
Oh man, GTA San Andreas.
Yeah,
like,
no, that
yeah.
friggin' that before breaking the internet, that broke whatever the hell the equivalent to the internet was at the time. People
Y'all
were
play
broken
that?
by-
You play that?
Absolutely. When San Andreas came out, that was
Yeah.
wild.
Mm-hmm.
You were like, oh, you could have dance offs with people at the beach. I can do whatever I want. I could customize my character. It's a whole free world. I could have a posse of people following me around, and
Yeah.
yeah, it was dope. And this guy looks like Easy E. It was great. I love San Andreas.
Yeah, I love that Sony and Nintendo did not end up having a partnership. I think it made games so much better
Absolutely.
than if Nintendo would have truly dominated. Because Nintendo has a huge Nintendo does dominate to a degree, but it's so nice to have like two very different major gaming companies
Right.
to have that competition.
Do you remember? I'll tell you, one of the first times where I like kind of fell in love with the game, where I'm like, holy shit, aside from like Shadows of the Empire and Nintendo 64 and stuff. But the time I fell in love with the game where like I like fell in love with like a character and a story in the sense of thinking like, oh, there can be so much more to this. It was called Oddworld Abe's Odyssey. Do you remember that game?
I've
Yes.
never played that. I
Do you,
don't know.
this is a deep game. You were an alien race that was enslaved by another alien race, and you had like these mystical powers, and you were like basically an escaped enslaved alien that was
What was it called?
with that your job was Oddworld Abe's Odyssey, that your job was to free other aliens, by the way, that were like locked up, and you had like these like mystical powers you could chant. It was like very like you were
I
given a bunch
remember
of,
this.
do you
That
remember-
is one of the only games I ever played.
Looking
I
at the
love
picture,
it.
and, you could communicate, like there was like a communicate option. You could communicate with your fellow.
Sure.
It was like this game was fantastic, and the graphics were good, and it was just so original, and like that was like one of the first video games that I fell in love with. But yeah, Oddworld, and it was a PlayStation 1 game, an original one.
He's
So
stretching.
Diddy's got a cat on her lap.
Yeah,
Always.
she's like Dr.
And-
Claw.
And I just want to ask, what is a cat's favorite sticker?
God damn it. What is it?
A scratch and sniff.
That's not even very clever. And you woke him up. You scared my baby. Look
I was gonna like it.